Welcome to meeting number 63 of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room as well as remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the members and the witnesses. Please do wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic and do mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom is at the bottom of your screen, and you have a choice of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use an earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be made through the chair. Now, pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee resumes consideration of the main estimates 2023-2024. Votes 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, and L30 under Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development. Vote 1 under International Development Research Center, and vote 1 under International Joint Commission, referred to the committee on Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. It is now my pleasure to welcome the Honourable Melanie Joly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Welcome back from your lengthy trip to Africa, which I understand you returned from yesterday. Mm-hmm. Moreover, I'd like to welcome your officials who are accompanying you today. And from the department, we have Ms. Cindy Termashwazian, who is the Associate Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. We have Ms. Sandra McCardell, the Assistant Deputy Minister for Europe, Arctic, Middle East, and Maghreb. And we also have Ms. Annick Ouellette, the Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer. Minister Joly, you will be provided 5 minutes for your remarks, after which we will proceed to opening it up to questions from the members. Yes,
yeah, just on
Mr. Chong.
A brief point of order, Mr. Chair. I'd like to voice my displeasure with the last-minute cancellation of the Deputy Minister of the Department of Foreign Affairs. This individual was slated to appear until 7:38 this morning, and we got a last-minute cancellation. I think it's an affront to the committee that the Deputy Minister would cancel at the last minute. His testimony would have been particularly relevant because he was in PCO in the summer of 2021. He was not only Foreign Affairs Advisor to the Prime Minister, he was also the acting National Security and Intelligence Advisor. So I'd like you, Mr. Chair, to voice our displeasure to the Department after this meeting about his last-minute cancellation at this meeting.
Mr. Chong, just do bear in mind that this is about main estimates, but your concern is duly noted.
He is the Deputy Minister.
Absolutely. No, but you were running through his previous experiences. That having been said, Madam Minister, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, dear Ali. Donc, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you.
I want to address the issue that is top of mind for everyone in the room. MP Chung, Michael, what has happened is completely unacceptable. I cannot imagine the shock and concern of learning that your loved ones have been targeted in this way. And at both a personal and also as Foreign Minister, I take this extremely seriously. You have all heard me say, and I've said it directly to my Chinese counterpart, that we will not tolerate any form of foreign interference. Not in our democracy, not in our internal affairs, full stop. I have made my expectations clear. All foreign agents in Canada must abide by the Vienna Convention. If they do not, there will be consequences. In light of the fact confirmed by CSIS, I have instructed my Deputy Minister to summon the Chinese ambassador. That is what he's doing as we speak. He will convey to him directly that we will not tolerate any form of foreign interference, and that all options, including expulsion of diplomats, remain at the table as we consider the consequences for this behavior. And of course, I'll have more to say if you ask me questions, which I'm convinced you will, on this very topic. J'aimerais aussi vous informer brièvement de la situation.
I also want to briefly inform you about the situation in Sudan. I came back from the region yesterday, Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, and I met our ambassador in Sudan, our Canadian High Commissioner in Kenya, and also our exceptional diplomats and employees that have been hired on the spot. More importantly, I met Canadians who were evacuated thanks to the rapid work and devotion of our team and the Canadian Armed Forces and the support from our partner countries, including many neighboring countries. I'm continuing to monitor closely the situation, and in collaboration with our colleagues in the defense and international development, we are now coordinating the response of our government. Beyond this immediate crisis, we think that Canada should and must help in humanitarian aid by supporting Sudanese government in a democratic country, having its dream of a democratic country and having long-term stability.
Months in my role. It has been a busy time, and not just for me personally. Thousands of global affairs employees in Ottawa and around the world have been at work as well and working extremely hard. Depuis des décennies, nous avons été confrontés à des conflits, et à des catastrophes naturelles et à un paysage géopolitique en constante évolution. Mais aujourd'hui, nous confrontons des changements de plus en plus rapides et des défis de plus en plus complexes, qu'il s'agisse de l'invasion illégale de l'Ukraine.
We're having some technical problems with translation.
Si je parle en français, est-ce que ça va?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good? Okay. So today we are facing increasingly rapid changes and more complex challenges, whether it's Ukraine invasion, the pandemic, climate change, or a wide gamut of challenges. And as Canadians, we are facing the impacts in our country. What has given me hope is that faced with these challenges, Canada is well positioned to address these challenges and to play a key role in its resolution.
For the world. But Canadians can be confident that we are rising to the occasion. The world changed profoundly on February 24th of last year with Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. In response to this attack on freedom and democracy, we have witnessed brave and heroic efforts of Ukrainians in their fight for freedom. Just as we have long worked to support democratic Ukraine, stood by the Ukrainian people fighting to protect their country since day one, we will be there to provide our full support after their victory as well. We'll also continue to use every tool available to make Putin pay for his war, imposing severe costs on the Russian regime and their enablers. And we will also not rest until those responsible for the war crimes and crimes against humanity being committed are brought to justice. While standing up against the Russian regime has brought Canada even closer to our NATO allies across the Atlantic, we are also a Pacific country. The Indo-Pacific is at the center of a massive global shift. Decisions made there will have an impact for Canadians for generations and, of course, decades to come. It is the fastest growing economic region in the world and one with which Canada has strong and growing ties. We'll act in the best interest of Canadians. We're also deepening our relationships with India, with Japan, with South Korea, all of which I've visited in recent months, as well as with ASEAN members. Enfin,
Finally, our government will continue to focus on Canadians' priorities while we are navigating complex realities, which are the ones that in the world that we live in today. Thanks to our talented diplomats, we will ensure that Canada is fully represented on the table and that our voice is firm and clearly heard. Mr. Chairman, we are committed to keeping the national interest and defending it, of course, and of course the interest of Canadians is at the heart of each of our decisions. On that note, I am now available to answer your questions in English and in French, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We will now open it to questions from the members. For the first round, each member will be provided 5 minutes, and the first member is MP Chong. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, when did you first find out that a PRC diplomat was targeting me and my family?
I've learned it through the news.
Why is this diplomat still here?
So I knew you would be asking me this question because it's a valid question. And, just to go back a second, I can only imagine the shock, the pain, the worry that you've gone through, dear Michael, due to the targeting of your family and loved ones. And so, as I mentioned earlier, on a personal level, and, as Foreign Minister, I take this extremely seriously. You've asked me questions regarding foreign interference in the past. I've always said that, of course, we would never tolerate any. And second, we would make sure that, if there was any violation of the Vienna Convention, we would take action.
Minister, Article 9 of the Vienna Convention is clear.
I will just, if I can.
I've heard your answer. It's
no, but I'm not finished.
Well, why is this diplomat still here? Article 9 of the Vienna Convention is clear. Article 9 says that the government can declare a diplomat persona non grata for no reason. The article is clear. So why is this diplomat still here? A diplomat who has more rights and immunities than the Canadians around this table to go around and conduct his foreign interference threat activities. He has diplomatic immunity. He cannot be criminally prosecuted. We all remember the case of the Russian diplomat who mowed down a Canadian citizen in a drunk driving case and killed her, and Minister Manley was unable to do anything about it. Mm-hmm. You have given accreditation to a diplomat here who is using his diplomatic immunity to target not just me and my family, but other members of Parliament. So why do you, Minister, continue to allow this diplomat to be accredited in this country on Canadian soil? That is the question. And you haven't answered the question.
Well, let me be able to answer the question. And of course, Michael, I understand your frustration and I understand your anger. So
we haven't expelled a single PRC diplomat.
Can I just
We are
finish?
One of the only democratic allies in the NATO alliance that has not expelled a single PRC diplomat. And Canadians are being targeted by the over 100 diplomats accredited
will you allow the minister to
Okay, thank
respond?
you. So, first and foremost, what we're doing right now as a government is we're assessing the consequences that we'll be facing in case of diplomatic expulsion, because there will be consequences. I think it's important that Canadians know what we've learned from the two Michael experience is that, of course, China and the PRC will take action. These interests, including economic interests, consular interests, and also diplomatic interests, will be
Minister, I can't think of any
affected,
interest.
and therefore, no,
Minister,
Michael, I just want to finish my answer because this is very important. It's about you, but it's about also the interests of the country. So, as we are assessing the interest, and I know that we are under pressure to go fast, we need to make sure as well that we protect our democracy. And that is why we will take action in light of the facts that are being presented regarding your case and, any MP that could be targeted. So that's why my deputy minister right now is meeting with the Chinese ambassador and summoning him. And that's why also we're assessing different options, including the expulsion of diplomats, because it is important that we take a decision.
Minister, just with respect to interests, economic and otherwise, I can't think of an interest more important to the Canadian state than the protection and the safety and the security of its own citizens here on Canadian soil. That trumps all other interests.
I agree with you.
It is inexplicable that this diplomat hasn't been told to leave the country already. And I would hope that the deputy minister is informing the ambassador that this individual, Mr. Wei Zhou, should be on the first plane out or declared persona non grata. And I think that that is the only course of action here, because if we do not take that course of action, Minister, we are basically putting up a giant billboard for all authoritarian states around the world that says we are open for foreign interference threat activities on Canadian soil, targeting Canadian citizens, and you can conduct these activities with zero consequences. And that's why this individual needs to be sent packing.
So
Mr. Chair, a question
and
about...
I share your concern regarding foreign interference. I share your concern regarding the message we would be sending. I think in order for this country to be safe and prosper, of course, democracy must be at our bedrock. That being said, we will take a decision thoughtfully. We will take a decision that will have the best interests of Canadians and
Mr.
our
Chair,
democracy in mind. But
I'd
as
like
I
to ask
mentioned,
a
all
question
options are on the table.
about
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question about the intelligence assessment dated July 20th, 2021. Did your department receive this intelligence assessment?
I was not the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I
understand that, but I'm asking if your department received it.
yes.
You were appointed minister on October 26th, several months later. I assume that your department received it. The Prime Minister indicated yesterday that that assessment never left CSIS. It seems inexplicable that it would not have left CSIS. CSIS doesn't produce intelligence products for its own consumption. It produces them for departments and central agencies.
Well, as you know, the Prime
and I am
Minister
trying
has
to find
asked
out why that
I'm
information
afraid
never made it out of
Mr.
CSIS.
Chong, you're considerably
Michael,
over your
the
time
Minister
now.
has asked an investigation on this.
So-
You know that. You had many conversations with the Prime Minister himself about this issue. You've been briefed about this
Bring
issue
this-
at least
Mr.
6
Chong,
times.
you're out of time.
So
I'd just
you've
like to
had
ask
access
Mr.
to that
Chong,
information.
you're a minute
ask-
and 20 seconds over time.
No, I'm not.
It says here 6 minutes and 14 seconds.
Yeah, I'm allocated 6 minutes rounds.
No, 5 minutes, as I indicated at the
Okay.
start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chong. So we now go to Madame Ben-Dayan. You have 5 minutes.
I believe it's my colleague, Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Spray.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Mandan. Welcome, Minister. Minister, I come from a region that's on the Pacific. I would say very safe to say 40% of the population in Lower Mainland hails from the Pacific countries, the Indo-Pacific in particular, China, India, Philippines, Taiwan, etc. So the Indo-Pacific strategy itself is a vital and very important strategy. I was hoping you can enlighten us how you've built that strategy, who you consulted with, and was rules-based order, rules-based trade, human rights, long-term security of territorial boundaries. Were these taken into consideration? If you can elaborate on that.
Thank you, Randy, dear MP Sarai. So, of course, the question of the Indo-Pacific strategy is extremely important. Why? Because it's the biggest investment in decades for Global Affairs Canada. It is a reckoning that we are a Pacific country, and that since what is going to happen in the Indo-Pacific will have an impact on Canadians for decades, we need to be there, and we need to make sure that we're strategic about it. So we invested $2.3 billion, which is 43 initiatives affecting 17 departments. And our goal is to make sure that we are able to invest in security. That's our first priority. The second one is trade. The third one is really everything linked to people-to-people ties, immigration, humanitarian aid. The fourth one is linked to climate change and investment in infrastructure. And finally, the one that is dear to my heart is the diplomatic footprint, being able to have a lot of expertise regarding the region, but also making sure that we increase our presence in the Indo-Pacific. So we are also putting a lot of emphasis on Japan and Korea because they're part of our neighborhood, which is the Northern Pacific. We are also investing in ASEAN countries. We want to make sure that we become a strategic level partner of ASEAN. And at the same time, we are making sure that we have a good working relationship with India. I've visited India in the past 2 times in the past 4 months as they are chairing the G20. But of course, everything we do is linked also to the protection and promotion of our national interests, and also making sure that we defend human rights, because that's part of who we are, that's part of our DNA, and that's part of our ongoing commitment at Foreign Affairs.
And Minister, how has your travels been? You were in Japan, I believe. You were in India twice, other parts of the region. How receptive are these states and the region itself to our Indo-Pacific strategy?
Well, they are extremely happy because, many of them have been saying, Canada has to be a reliable partner. And now you are a reliable partner because they see movement first and foremost, many of you have traveled to the region, so thank you for that. Many of the ministers have traveled to the region, but more than that, we have strong people-to-people ties. We have great academics, great students, great business people, and so this is a full court press in Canadians in general as we look even more west, which is fundamental to us. I know that. Randy, you're from BC. Some of you are from BC, and it's natural to think ourselves as a Pacific country. But I think for too long we've been very much looking south to our best friend and neighbor, the U.S., and looking east to Europe because of our history. But it's really important that we be able to look west. And thank you for the BC leadership to that extent.
Thank you. Minister, now switching to our best friend to the south, the Americans. We had a bit of a strained relationship, specifically with trade with the previous leadership in the United States. President Biden was just here. Can you tell us a little bit if that relationship is strengthened now? Is it more stronger? And where can we move forward with that relationship, as Surrey is also a border city with the United States? And just as we trade with the Pacific, we trade heavily with the United States as well.
Yeah. Well, I think we had a fantastic visit by President Biden and his team. I think that we've been able to work together on many of the economic benefits linked to investing in growing your economy, particularly everything linked to the green investments and the supply chain development of clean energy, green infrastructure, electric vehicles, and batteries. At the same time, I must say that I have the chance to see my counterpart, Tony Blinken, pretty much every month or every 3 weeks. We have a very good relationship. I would call him a friend. And we work together on many geopolitical issues that range the relationship with China, the reality that Ukrainians are facing right now with Russia's illegal invasion, to protecting the Arctic together, finding a solution, a peaceful one for Sudan, making sure that Haiti also is top of mind as the situation is deteriorating. So you can see that at the foreign affairs side, of course, we're working together on a range of geopolitical issues. At the same time, we have a good bilateral relationship. One of the things we worked together on was also the Safe Third Country Agreement, along with my other colleagues, as we wanted to make sure that we protected our sovereignty, but also were able to cover the entire border.
Thank you, Minister. We next go to MP Bergeron. You have 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, can you hear? Okay, I'll turn on my microphone by myself. Okay, so thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us here with your aides. I want to first say that it's unfortunate that we have so few opportunities to discuss with you, and which is not quite normal because we are the Foreign Affairs Committee, and it's unfortunate too that the time is always so short. Well, in the expenditure, the main budget, we will allocate more than $10 million for cooperation with security and cooperation in Europe. That is an important thing, but the European Council has excluded Russia following the declaration of war against Ukraine, and I was in favor of this exclusion. I expressed that in Parliament recently. So while Russia is still a member of OECD, we will have to bear with its presence. We also know that it's co-chair in the Minsk group, which was supposed to find a solution to a conflict in Upper Karabakh. And on 25th April, you once again exhorted the authorities to open up the corridor of Achin and ask that corridor should be open so that there would be free movement of people and goods. And that request was still unanswered. So have you had an opportunity to contact with your counterpart Azeri to talk about this issue, and what are you expecting from OECD, especially the Minsk group, to ensure that finally the situation will be addressed, because it's really becoming a humanitarian crisis? Thank you. This is a very good question, and I share with the concerns of the Armenian community here, considering that that corridor has been blocked and that it has humanitarian consequences. And I called on the House of Commons, I think, a month ago, to ask that the parties to the ceasefire process, both countries respect the ceasefire conditions, but that is not the case today. And you mentioned that OECD is a community that I have a lot of influence, but the situation is quite difficult. The situation of Minsk is quite difficult, but there are avenues that are being observed to find a solution to ensure that we find some level of peace in Karabakh and ensure that the Armenian community there is protected. That is the European Union peace process. So I asked the EU to allow Canada to participate in this peace process. We are now negotiating with the European Union on that question, so I will talk about it more later on, I'm sure. And we know that what is happening with the Armenian community is very important, and I'm paying special attention to it. Thank you. Very well. I guess we will have to be satisfied with that answer for now. In the budget, we are also talking about $4 billion and more allocated to development and peace building and security. The Prime Minister was engaged to this when he was hosting a peacekeeping conference in Vancouver. He said that Canada will provide 200 soldiers, and we have just a handful of them. So was that promise budgeted? Does Canada still have the intention of meeting this promise, and when will that be done? Well, your question is pertinent. It's important that Canada plays a key role at the international level to ensure global stability, especially at a time when there are concerns that conflicts around the world could become international, and that is a real concern. This is why it's important that I had to go to Kenya to address the situation of the Sudan crisis, because that crisis could have several impacts. It would destabilize the region. It would force migrations that would weaken the region and cause some pressure in several countries, and it should not be a second theater of similar to what is happening in Europe. So I wanted to go there, yes, to meet Canadians who are in the crisis and meet diplomats, but we also wanted Canada. Okay, I will answer your question in the next round. Thank you.
We next go to MP McPherson. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here, Minister. I have a few comments I wanted to make first, and then I'll ask you a series of questions. First of all, I wanted to say that knowing that I stand in solidarity with our colleague Michael Chong. You know, to know that ambassador or that diplomat is still here is appalling, and to hear you say things like that you're assessing it makes me very, very concerned that you're not taking this as seriously as you should. And that sort of leads into my second comment. You know, we've been meeting, as I'm sure many people around this table have, with human rights defenders, church groups, faith groups, international development organizations. Many of them have let us know that despite the fact that they have reached out to you multiple times in some cases, they rarely hear back from your department. And I am worried about that. I am worried that is a trend, that you are not responding to organizations. And so I just want to flag that for you. I know you won't be able to respond to that right now. But to start with, I think what I'll do is ask you a few questions about Canada's arms sales. You know, you said to Mr. Sarai that defending human rights is part of our DNA. I met with Amnesty International today from Peru, and they were talking about the challenges that are happening in Peru. Canada continues to sell arms to Peru. We continue to sell arms to Saudi Arabia. We continue to sell arms to Israel. We continue to sell arms to Colombia. And yet you have told me in the past that that wouldn't be the case, that you would make sure that we were living up to the obligations under the Arms Trade Treaty. And yet, Minister, this does not look to me, unless you have a vastly different definition of what the Arms Trade Treaty means, it doesn't look to me like you're living up to that. Can you tell us why?
Okay, thank you. So there's many questions in there. So first and foremost, just to go back to what I was saying regarding MP Chong, Michael's reality right now.
I was just making a comment. I'd actually prefer if you just respond to the arms.
So I want to reiterate the fact that I take it very seriously, and the question of expulsing
Minister, I think you know I only have 5 minutes, so I would prefer you go to the arms.
And so I hear you. And the second thing regarding meeting with human rights defenders, Heather, please. I'm always available, except when I'm not in the country.
Madam
but
Minister, please go to the arms question.
We
I know
will
you don't
always
want to
make
answer
sure
that one,
to make
but I would really prefer you answer that one.
Ourselves available. No, but I think it was important just to address that. Regarding Canada's arms sales, I know this is important for you. I know you've raised it with me. I know it's important also for your party. And we've been having ongoing conversation with Amnesty International. Actually, I met Amnesty International when I was in Sudan 2 days ago. But I hear you regarding the fact that export controls are a preoccupation for you. At the same time, I want to reassure you that we have one of the strongest export control systems in the world, and at the same time, we will always we will always make sure that the respect for human rights be enshrined in our legislation and also taken into consideration when taking decisions.
One would think that that may not be accurate, considering that we are still selling weapons to places where there are very clear documented human rights abuses happening. I was also just in Japan, and as you know, the G7 is coming up in Hiroshima. Yeah. We listened to the Hibakusha, the survivors of the atomic bomb, and one of the things that they certainly have expressed is the need for us to be moving on nuclear disarmament. As you know, other NATO countries have agreed to attend as observers. Much of the nuclear disarmament talks on the TPNW. Canada, to date, has refused to do that, has refused to engage in any way with the TPNW, which is appalling, considering that I believe members of your government had said that they were in support of that prior to being elected. So I'm just wondering if the government is planning on sending an observation delegation to New York this year for the state's member meetings.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, indeed, we are concerned about the race to nuclear weapons, particularly at a time where the international security is at stake, and that we are seeing a rise of authoritarianism. In that sense, Canada will always be putting human security and disarmament at the core of our foreign policy, and that is why also that we've made sure that we would be joining the fissile material treaty, which is at the core also of making sure that we address the issues linked to nuclear armament. Now, I've raised this issue at NATO. I've raised it at the G7. I was there in the name of the Prime Minister with Prime Minister Kishida last September at the UN General Assembly regarding the importance of nuclear disarmament, and you can always count on Canada's voice on this issue.
One very quick question. Will you be sending yourself, will you or anyone from the Cabinet be, sending myself, will you or anyone from the Cabinet be attending any of the G20 meetings in Kashmir?
So we'll take a decision, when is required, but we will be attending G20 decisions, meetings.
In Kashmir?
Because it is important that Canada's voice be heard, particularly at the time of international security
You will
issues.
send somebody to Kashmir,
Thank you, Madam McPherson. You're out of time. So we will now go to the second round. Each member will be provided 3 minutes, and we commence with MP Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I just have a simple question. Former CSIS Director Dick Fadden said yesterday that the intelligence assessment of July 20th most certainly would have gone to the Foreign Affairs Department. Can you commit to this committee to providing us with an answer as to whether or not that report made it to your department.
Sorry, Michael, can you repeat the report? I didn't hear well.
Yeah, can you commit to this committee in providing us an answer after the committee is done? Can you commit that officials will tell this committee whether or not the intelligence assessment dated July 20th, 2022, that it was sent from CSIS to your department? Can you just commit to getting back to us with an answer, yes or no?
I need to make sure that I abide by my oath, and therefore that the information that is classified.
Let me just clarify your oath, because this is important. This portions of this report have been declassified by David Vigneault. He declassified that under Canadian law because in order to prevent threats to me and my family, and he's authorized under law to declassify certain portions of it, which he did. Mm-hmm. I'm not asking for the report. I'm just asking if the department would let the committee know whether or not it received this report. The report is titled PRC Foreign Interference in Canada, a Critical National Security Threat, CSIS IA 2021-22-31. So I just wondering, Minister, if you would commit to the committee in letting us know whether or not the department actually got this report.
What I can say to you is I'll shed light on this issue, and I'll make sure that we're as transparent as possible.
Thank you. I take that as a yes, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick thing. Second question. CSIS just came out with his 2022 report. It says, foreign interference directed at Canada's democratic institutions and processes at all levels of government can be an effective way for foreign states to achieve its immediate, medium, and long-term strategic objectives. Foreign states, again, directly and via proxies may seek to influence electoral nomination processes, shape public discourse, or influence policy positions of elected officials using covert tactics. The purpose is to advance issues or policies that favor the foreign state or to quell dissent. The report then goes on to make two recommendations to your government. These threat actors must be held accountable for their clandestine activities. The report goes on to recommend, goes on to say, we will also continue to inform national security stakeholders and all Canadians about foreign interference. So my simple question is, why is the government not following the advice of CSIS in holding actors accountable for their clandestine and covert
first and
coercive
foremost,
activities?
Of course, you know that CSIS is under the Minister of Public Safety's responsibility, and of course I work with him on this issue. And we all want to make sure that we protect Canadians across the country and abroad. At the same time, we need to make sure that we are acting in a thoughtful manner to address this, because this is affecting all of us and affecting our democracy. So yes, I can tell you there will be actions. The first part of the series of actions is right now my deputy minister talking to the Chinese ambassador and summoning him. And also, I've raised it directly with my Chinese counterparts. I think it's important that I be able to do so and continue to engage. At the same time, what I would tell you as well is we will continue to protect our democracy, and I hope that we can work all together, because this is not a partisan issue. This is something that every single party and every single Canadians want us to be able to solve. Thank you.
Thank you. We next go to MP Zuberi. You have 3 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam Minister, for being here with us today.
Our department do amazing work, an important work representing Canada's interests across the globe and putting forth our approach, which is the respect of the rules-based order. And we've heard a lot about what's happened to one of our colleagues in the news, and we all stand together in being extremely disturbed by this affront to the rights of a parliamentarian. You did touch upon what we are doing with respect to our engagement with China, and in this particular incident, I just want to give you a moment if there was anything else you want to share with respect to how we are protecting democracy and how that also balances with the economic concerns and interests of Canada. We do deal with human rights, protect democracy, but we also must engage in trade with the world.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you, MP Zuberi. There's two things to your two aspects to your question that is important. The first one is, I think we were clear when we came up with the Indo-Pacific strategy last November. And at the time, I had conversations with many of you, including MP Chung, and about the fact that we needed to have a strong and clear position regarding the Indo-Pacific, but also China in particular. And at the time, we said that we thought that China was an increasingly disruptive global power. And, I've been saying that, I'll continue to say that. And I was quite happy that this didn't become a partisan issue. I think we all agreed that that was the right thing to do. And in this strategy also, there was more money to address the issues of foreign interference, giving more funding to CSIS, giving more funding to the RCMP. It also, in the strategy, it was clear that the question of the Uyghurs was also extremely important. And I know that MP Zuberi, dear Samer, you've been working on this. We've been supportive as a government to your motion to address the human rights violations against the Uyghurs, which the UN called a crime against humanity, and also that we would be doing our part to bring Uyghurs to Canada. And I'm happy also, again, this was a non-partisan issue. Everybody supported you. And in that sense, MP Chung, the allegation, the facts that are linked to his targeting by the PRC is linked to his work on the Uyghurs. And so I think that it is important that we recognize that as a country now and as a parliament, we have a position which is important, which is always part of Canada's DNA, which is to call out situations and violations against human rights, including in China, which is an important player on the world stage, and will continue to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. You're out of time. We next go to MP Bergeron. You have a minute and a half, Mr. Bergeron.
Alors, Monsieur le
So, Mr. Chairman, in the main estimates, we see that there is over $1 billion to support Canada's presence abroad. I want to underscore here that it is said that there will be a permanent standing mission in Addis Ababa in the African Union, and the diplomatic office in Kigali would become a high commission. What I want to know is, where do we stand on this? I had the opportunity to ask a similar question to the Minister of International Development. I know that we should receive information from him, but maybe, Madam Minister, you know more about the African strategy that the Parliamentary Secretary wanted to develop, the bill on the African strategy that we wanted to develop in 2022. So where do we stand on that? And maybe you can also talk about peace missions while we're there. Well, different things. Yes, we have allocated more money to increase Canada's presence around the world. That's good news. I announced in last June, that there will be 6 embassies across the world, and in Indo-Pacific area, we have added 1 additional embassy, so 7 embassies in total. So in the IAU, we will have 1 in Kigali in Rwanda, Slovakia, Estonia, Armenia, which is one of my favorite topics, and also in the Fiji Islands. So the purpose here is for our diplomats to have eyes and ears on the ground so that they can know exactly what is happening and therefore inform the government of Canada and you here around the table. At the African Union, I will have the opportunity to announce a permanent representative shortly, so things are moving forward well, and we are going to work to ensure that that person will be in contact with the embassy and will be cautioned within the embassy in Addis Ababa. And in Kigali, Rwanda, I will have an opportunity to announce a new ambassador as well shortly, so that they will be working in Kigali and also covering Burundi. So we're going to be able to reduce the burden of our embassy in Kenya, and we will make sure that our new High Commissioner to Rwanda will have their accreditation as quickly as possible. That is part of our vision to increase our role in Africa. As I said, I'm just back from Kenya, where I had good conversations with our colleagues.
A minute and a half. So we're considerably over. Madam McPherson, you have a minute and a half.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again, Minister, for being here with us. Minister, I think you probably know, but I've put forward a motion at this committee to conduct a comprehensive study on the actions of that Canada should take to foster peace and respect for human rights and international law in Israel and Palestine. I think we can all agree that recent events have made it very clear that Canada's foreign policy towards the Middle East is not working and needs some serious review. Will your government be supporting that study?
Of course, we'll support any study regarding what is happening in the Middle East, and looking forward to hearing everybody regarding this issue. Thank you, Heather, for taking the leadership on this issue. I think that when it comes to our commitment to a lasting peace, it's always been our historic position, which we support a two-state solution. But at the same time, this two-state solution must be linked to the fact that there is respect for the rule of law. And you saw my comments regarding the judicial reform that is happening in Israel right now. I'm extremely concerned. I've conveyed it to my counterpart in Israel. I've talked also to my counterpart of the Palestinian Authority. And we need to make sure that this commitment to the rule of law by Israel be respected. And so I think also that many members of the Jewish community here have concerns regarding what's going on. And so I've been meeting with them. I've been meeting also with the Muslim community and trying to find a way that we can eventually, I hope, charter peace and that these two states be able to live in peace and security side by side.
It'd be awfully good, as well as if you could stop selling arms to Israel in the meantime, and also, of course, as they are breaking some of those international agreements, that you did look at the voting record at the UN.
You're out of time. Thank you. So we now go to MP Hoback. You have 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. Minister, the Prime Minister was quoted in the media of saying that Canada would never, ever meet its 2% commitments in regards to our spending for military aid. Are you finding those types of comments having impact on our ability to be involved in groups like AUKUS and Quad? Is that why we're being left out of so many more multilateral meetings where we're not invited to the table?
So thank you, MP Oback. Thank you, Randy. First and foremost, I think it's clear that we've invested more than ever in our Canadian Armed Forces, but there more needs to be done. I think there's clearly that recognition on the part of the government, and that is why my colleague, the Minister of Defense, is undergoing a very important defense policy review, and I will be supporting her in that work. At the same time, I've had numerous conversations with Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO. He was here in Canada last summer. We went to the Arctic all together, and also with my Ukrainians friends and counterpart. And I think that when you look at how much Canada is supporting Ukraine right now, we are the country per capita that supports the most Ukraine. And so I think we can be all proud of the work we're doing. And at the same time, I think that we need to make sure that while we are investing a lot in Europe, it is important that we look at the Pacific as well. And so that's why in the Indo-Pacific strategy, there was actually a commitment of $500 million more in defense, particularly having a frigate more. And now at this point, after the U.S. and France, we have the most frigate in the Indo-Pacific.
What is the other issue then? Why are we not being involved in these types of conversations? Why are we always on the outside and looking in? Latest example, U.S. and Europe in negotiations on aluminum steel tariffs and a carbon border adjustment mechanism.
Well,
why are we not part of those discussions? Why are we sitting on the outside waiting for their results?
We're part of these conversations,
But you're not
definitely
at the
when it
table.
comes to AUKUS. We've had many conversations about this very issue and the next steps of AUKUS, particularly when it comes to cyber and technology. I think it's important. We are not in the business of nuclear subs, so that's why also we're not part of the first AUKUS deal. But at the same time, I think as we, really
I don't
put
mean to be
money
rude,
where
Miss,
our
let me get
mouth
a minute
is
or
in the
left here.
context of the Indo-Pacific, I think that now our partners and allies in the region see us as a reliable partner.
Do they really see us as a reliable partner? I know you've been going around the world talking about critical minerals and how Canada can contribute in the next generation of vehicles. But I'm getting pushback saying, prove to me you can get them out of the ground. Prove to me you can get them to market. Prove to me you can go through the processes here in Canada to actually meet the commitments that you're selling around the world. What confidence do you have in that?
I think my
Very
confidence is
briefly,
extremely
Minister.
high regarding that, particularly with Japan and Korea. I think when you look at President Yoon, the president of South Korea, his first bilateral visit in the world was to Canada.
Oh, there's no question they want it. It's just
Mr. Hoback, I'm afraid you're out of time. Mr. Hoback, you're out of time. So we next go to MP Cervera. You have 3 minutes, MP Cervera.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Minister. I'll be splitting my time with Parliamentary Secretary Bendoen. Quickly, the Arctic is obviously of utmost importance, northern Canada, this beautiful country. It's important for many reasons, militarily, economically, and security-wise. There was an agreement signed with regards to Hans Island, excuse me. I'd like to, if you could touch upon that and how that fits in within our Arctic strategy. Thank you, Minister.
Well, the Arctic is extremely important for us. It is the high north, but we want to make sure that it remains a low-tension region. That is why we want to make sure that we abide by the international rules-based order and that we find a diplomatic solution. That's exactly what we did with Denmark and Greenland last June by settling a 50-year-old whiskey war between our both nations, and we were able to settle on a diplomatic solution. And also, we now have the longest maritime border with another country in the world. So it took 50 years. I think you just had to wait for the right foreign minister.
I agree. You see the accordion?
No. So I'm just joking. I just would like to thank my great diplomat colleagues who've done the work for so many years. And meanwhile, I must add, I've been practically engaging the Nordic Fives. So the 5 Nordic countries. My colleague from Norway was here a month and a half ago. Engaging the U.S. as the U.S. presented its updated Arctic strategy, and also to go back to what Randy was asking me regarding Japan, Korea, etc. We know that we have NATO to the east. We know that we have NORAD also for the Great North, but we need to make sure that we protect the western gate of the Arctic, and that's why our relationship with Japan and Korea is extremely important, and that's why I'm putting a lot of energy into that relationship. I will be going to South Korea and Japan in the coming days.
You still have
Parliamentary
approximately
Secretary,
40 seconds.
I'd like to split my time with
MP
Parliamentary
Bendayan.
Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to pick up on a question that was asked earlier regarding Israel, the NDP is proposing to impose sanctions and boycotts on certain exports and imports of Israeli products, and you mentioned that you're speaking to the Jewish community here in Canada. How would you say that would impact our relations with Israel, but also how would it be received by the Jewish community here?
I think you can answer that question yourself also.
Has our position changed, Minister?
Our position has not changed.
Thank you.
Has not changed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the questions.
Point of order, Chair. The minister is available, I understand, for a full hour. We would like to use the last 7 minutes. This is the first time we've had the minister in almost a year, and we only have her for an hour. So I suggest a lightning round in the remaining 7 minutes she has available.
As you know, Mr. Jennis, we have to take a few votes on the main estimate, so that will take up some time. And we also have another witness who is scheduled for 12 o'clock.
Is it the will of the rest of the committee to hear from the minister for the remaining time?
Yes.
I see the government members nodding.
5 minutes, 6 minutes?
Well, that's, yeah. That's what everybody
Okay,
wants,
so
Chair.
each party will be provided an extra minute. Do you have a proposal as to who
I do
will
have a
go
point of
for
order.
it? Yes, Mr. App,
How
you
is
have
it that a member can just
Well,
ask,
Mr.
throw out
Oliphant then
the will of the
agrees with
committee?
him, and
This is, you are the chair, you direct
I am the
the
chair, but
question.
Mr. Oliphant seemed to
The question
agree
should
with him.
come through you instead of being lobbed onto the floor.
I agree.
So I didn't hear you ask us if we want to have this extended. I don't mind at all, but I think I'm sorry, I have the floor, you don't. When the chair recognizes you, then you have the floor. I think you should ask us a question, and we can choose if we want to extend. I don't have any issue whatsoever doing so, but that's for you to do and not for a random member of the committee, even with all due respect to the vice chair,
And now
to lob it
being
onto the floor.
5 minutes after, and given the fact that we do have the prosecutor from the ICC waiting, and the fact that we have a few votes, which is going to take a few minutes, we will conclude this meeting.
Point of order, Chair. Can you
thank
consult
you
the
very
committee?
much.
You're supposed to take direction. The majority of the committee clearly wants this. So
No,
if,
that was not the indication. There was no vote or anything of the sort. So thank you very, very much, Minister.
we have only had
Allow
her.
me to
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le
also
Président. Point d'ordre.
Point of order, Chairman.
officials.
Non, non,
As well.
Monsieur le Président.
You asked for unanimous consent and you received unanimous consent.
There wasn't unanimous consent.
Je pense pas que Monsieur Zoubé.
I don't think that Mr. Zuberi refused unanimous consent. He just wanted it to go through you.
Thank the minister and her officials for having made themselves available. Very, very grateful for the time you provided all the members. Thank you. Now, members, as you know, after consideration of main estimates, there are a number of votes that we have to go through. Did the members want to vote unanimously in favor of the 5 votes we have to do? Mr. Bergeron, I have a question.
Yeah.
Order. Excuse me, no one has been recognized to speak.
Chair, point of order. If a request is made for unanimous consent and the committee has unanimously agreed on something.
No, there was no unanimous consent. You specifically asked for unanimous consent. There was not unanimous consent, Mr.
There was
Jennings.
no objection to
and you
hearing
know
from the
full
minister
well
longer.
that is the prerogative of the chair to
wanted
make
the chair
sure
to put the
that
question.
things move smoothly.
The
Mr.
issue
Jennings.
is we have not heard
Mr.
from
Jennings,
this
there
minister
was no
for
unanimous
a full
consent.
hour in a year.
The issue
Mr.
is
Jennings,
The minister has to be accountable to this committee, and it's been a year.
Mr. Jennings. So, is it the will of the members to vote by unanimous consent for the 6 different votes? My apologies, the 5 different votes we want to do. There's a vote
On division.
On division, okay. So, and these are for the purposes of reporting them to the House. So, on vote 1, is there on division? Absolutely. Okay, so all of them on division. Is there consent on behalf of everyone on that? Okay. Next question, shall I report vote 1 under the International Development Research Center, less the amounts voted in interim supply to the House? On division? Thank you. Shall I report vote 1 under the International Joint Commission, less the amounts voted in interim supply to the House? All on division. On division. Shall I report the votes on the main estimates to the House? On division. Now we'll suspend for approximately 2 minutes before we welcome the ICC prosecutor. Thank you. Welcome back. We will now resume our second hour of committee hearing today. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee is holding a briefing with the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. It is my great pleasure and distinct honor to welcome to committee today Mr. Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. We also have with us today Mr. Irwin Cutler, our former Minister of Justice and Attorney General, as well as the founder and international chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. And in addition to that, we also have Mr. Alan Rock, our former Minister of Justice and Attorney General, as well as our former ambassador to the United Nations. Now, Mr. Prosecutor, you will be provided 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which we will go to the members who will be provided the opportunity to ask you questions. Once you're getting very close to the time limit, either in your opening remarks or when you're responding to any of the members, I will hold this up, and that indicates that we'd be grateful if you could wrap it up as expeditiously as possible. That having been said, Mr. Khan, we welcome you, and you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Mr. Chair, honourable members, it's really a great honour and great privilege to be given the opportunity of saying a few words. And I have to thank, it would be remiss of me not to thank two great Canadians, two great Democrats who I have the honour of having to my left and my right, Honourable Irwin Cutler and Alan Rock. They are friends of justice in every situation, and I'm really privileged to have their support. I'm giving the lecture this evening at the invitation of both, the Elie Wiesel Lecture, and I think it's very appropriate because the ICC is a child of Nuremberg. The ICC was born as a testament to man's inhumanity to his fellow man, woman and child, and the promise of never again that should have compelled greater action after the Holocaust remains an urgent need, because we see it for the Rohingya, we see it in the DRC, we see it in Ukraine, we see it in so many parts of the world. We're very lucky. I feel very privileged to be here in Canada, because Canada has a distinguished record of being amongst the very strongest supporters of international law, not by way of words, but by way of deeds. Philip Kirsch was the first president of the court. The current vice president of the Assembly of State Parties is another great Canadian, Bob Rae, and I count on his support every day in terms of his stewardship and vice chairmanship of the Assembly of State Parties. The last president of the court was a Chileoboyi Suji, who's a Canadian as well as a Nigerian. And my special advisor on genocide, Professor Pai Machavan, is another Canadian and co-chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Institute. I think every moment perhaps can be seen as critical, and they are critical. Every moment, every generation has different challenges, different opportunities, and history then decides, did the generations of the past rise to the challenges and exceed expectations, or did they fail? Did they not manage to live up to the demands of the hour? And I think that is a critical issue now. When we see so many conflagrations in different parts of the world, we see the brutality of sexual or gender-based violence, the crime of persecution, dislocation and deportation of the very most vulnerable of our population in children, in so many different situations. I think the ICC has an important role to play. We cannot be pedestrian. We cannot simply be a court espousing the importance of normative values. We have to show the impact of international justice where it is most needed and at the time it is most needed. I think since I've become prosecutor, we've tried with great alacrity to focus on field presence. We have an interview facility in Cox's Bazar, where I was on the 24th of February, when the Russian Federation invaded Ukraine. We have an agreement with President Zelensky and the Ukrainian authorities to have an office in Kyiv. We're trying, with all the difficulties we have, in Khartoum and in Tripoli to have a field presence, and I have an agreement to have an office in Caracas. Being close to the people isn't politics. It is essential to understand the demands of criminal justice, that we cannot succeed, we cannot prove cases beyond reasonable doubt unless we know the undercurrents, the history, the culture, the politics, the connections. And we can't do that by big legal paratroopers parachuting in to hotels for a few weeks and then flying out. We need to be with the people to learn, study, and then collaborate. The other aspect is partnerships. The idea that the ICC is an apex court is legally wrong. It's built upon complementarity. And the revolution that we're in the midst of in the office to transform the e-discovery system, I think is absolutely necessary and long overdue. One cannot deal with this digital age with analog tools. The ability to use voice-to-text transcription, automated translation, face identification will give us the tools to ingest far more information that will allow us not only to build stronger cases, investigate incriminating and exonerating evidence equally, as we're required to do, but it will also allow us to be a hub, to give information to national authorities, because one thing I've said before Ukraine, I said it before I was elected, I care not a jot about which flag is behind an independent judge, whether it's the flag of Canada or the ICC, whether it's the flag of Colombia or the flag of the Central African Republic. What victims need at this moment, what societies feel at this moment when their trust in international institutions, whether it's the United Nations or the ICC or even member states, is not what we would hope it to be. They need to see action and that their lives matter, and they feel when they're exposed to the elements and exposed to bullets or machetes or bombs or missiles, that the law, it provides them a shelter. And I think if we do that, maybe when we give up our current responsibilities and move on, the generations and leaders that come after us will think we did our best and we didn't fall short for the needs of this present moment in time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prosecutor Khan. We will now open it to questions from the members. For the first round, we have 4 minutes each, and we start off with MP Chung.
Mr. Chair, thank you for appearing in front of our committee. We appreciate it greatly. I'd like to focus on Iran and some of the malevolent actors that may be there. Could you tell us what investigations, what work is going on to investigate individuals connected to the Islamic Republic of Iran and their human rights abuses?
Yes, the ICC has jurisdiction provided by the statute. Iran is not a state party to the ICC, nor has the Security Council referred the matter, nor has Iran made a declaration to accept the jurisdiction of the court. In those circumstances, I'm not looking at Iran at all. I have no legal jurisdiction to do so.
Is there any opportunity to take a look at individuals, citizens of the Islamic Republic of Iran who are engaged in these activities in the same way that you undertook your investigation of President Putin?
The jurisdiction in relation to Ukraine arose because Ukraine, as an exercise of its sovereign authorities, under Article 12.3 of the statute, made a declaration in 2014 and again in 2015 that they accepted the jurisdiction of the court. Because of that, I had jurisdiction to investigate international crimes in Ukraine. I have not received such a declaration from the Islamic Republic of Iran, and therefore I'm focusing on the jurisdiction I do have.
Yeah, I guess my question is, in the case of President Putin, who is a citizen of the Russian Federation, which is not a state party to the Rome Statute, you undertook an investigation which led to the outcome that was recently announced. Is it not possible to prosecute members of the Iranian regime that are not in Iran, that are connected to human rights abuses outside of Iran in places where you have jurisdiction, where the member state is a state party to the Rome Statute.
Yes. So I think the most honest answer I can give is that, leaving aside the specific country you mention, as a matter of law, if a crime is committed on the territory of a state party that is within our jurisdiction, the statute gives us authority to look into it. But there has to be a crime of a sufficient gravity on the territory of a country for which we have jurisdiction. If we don't have that evidence, the answer is no. If we have that evidence, the answer would be exactly we could. But all of these issues are determined. I know exactly what you're asking and why. It depends upon the evidence, and I'm not going to discuss evidence we may have or we don't have, but I'm trying to focus on solid cases with reliable evidence that is strong enough to withstand scrutiny in the courtroom.
Well, thank you for that. On the malevolent activities taking place in areas where you do have jurisdiction, I'm thinking about sub-Saharan African countries where we are hearing reports of gross human rights violations being committed by the Wagner Group and by other Russian mercenaries. Can you tell us what investigations might be going on there?
I think what you'll understand, same as law enforcement in Canada, we don't telegraph investigations in advance because the investigations have to be both discreet. There may be witness protection issues and all the rest of it, but you're quite right. We have jurisdiction in most of the countries of the Sahel region, in Sudan, in Libya, that were referred to by the Security Council. We will use our resources that we have as effectively as we can, realizing that the demands on the office have for a number of years been too great, the situations have been too many, and the requirement and the burden of proof is properly very high. We're not a human rights documenter in which a smell of suspicion is enough to move forward. We have to be as vigorous as we would be as if we were presenting a case to the Central Criminal Court here in Ottawa. It has to be a high standard of proof, and that's the standard which we are holding ourselves to. And that has resource implications.
Thank you. We next go to MP Ben Dayan. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll pick up where Mr. Chong left off. I understand quite well the reasons why you have determined that you have jurisdiction in the case of President Putin, and I believe that it was on March 17th, 2023, that the ICC pretrial chamber issued the arrest warrants for both President Putin and his Commissioner for Children's Rights. As a signatory to the ICC Rome Statute, South Africa is legally obliged to act on the ICC arrest warrant, Mr. Khan, as you know, if Putin arrives in country, as he is expected to do, I believe, this August for a summit in South Africa. South Africa's Justice Minister, however, Lamola, indicated that he is looking at extending customary diplomatic immunity to President Putin. Can you give us a sense, Mr. Khan, of what options are available to the ICC if South Africa is legally able to do that, and if there is any way to enforce the arrest warrant while President Putin is in South Africa?
Well, South Africa is a very important and respected state party. It hasn't been dragged kicking and screaming to the Rome Statute. There have been statements more recently in relation to the acknowledgement by South Africa about its obligations under the Rome Statute. They have gone on record as saying that they are aware of those responsibilities. I don't think they need any tutelage from me. I think they are quite aware of their responsibilities, and I think I have confidence that they will do the right thing. And I think I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. I'll turn now to the issue of Iran, but from a different angle. Mr. Prosecutor, in September, lawyers representing the families of PS 752 victims submitted an Article 15 communication to your office, I believe, providing information and evidence about crimes that occurred when Iranian missiles brought down Ukraine International Flight PS 752. Can you tell us a little bit more about where this case is at and how you see next steps?
Unfortunately, I'll ask for your forgiveness. I don't comment on communications received. We have a process. Those communications that we receive, we have thousands every month. are reviewed in terms of our policies and our look at the gravity and the types of evidence and our jurisdiction, and we will follow the normal process in relation to how we deal with those.
And at this time, can you confirm whether or not the ICC would have jurisdiction in this matter?
I must refer you to the answer I gave a moment ago, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. And perhaps then I would just put on the record how important it is to this government that the families of PS 752 see justice, and how important it is that the ICC do take up this matter in the view of our government. Thank you.
Have 1 minute remaining.
Oh, apologies. Mr. Khan, perhaps then I could ask you to comment, and I would invite Professors Kotler and Mr. Rock to comment as well on some of the work that you're currently engaged in order and given your last comment, perhaps I look to Professors Kotler and Rock to talk a little bit about the work that you are doing in order to help prisoners of conscience in Iran. Professor Kotler, I'll start with you.
Well, the question of political prisoners in Iran is, of course, a priority in our work at Raoul Wallenberg Center. As to the jurisdiction of the ICC, I think the special prosecutors responded to that. I just might say that in the room today, and I'll use this occasion to, we have with us Evgeny Kara-Murza, who appeared before this committee. Since he appeared before this committee, as you know, her husband Vladimir Kara-Murza has been sentenced to 25 years in prison, and part of that sentence relates to the work that the special prosecutor does, in the sense that he was charged with treason for his critique of Russia's criminal aggression in Ukraine, accompanied by international crimes. We see political prisoners really as a looking glass into the present historical inflection moment, which I can sum up in one sentence. We're witnessing a resurgent global authoritarianism, the backsliding of democracies, assaults on human rights, and political prisoners who not only are looking glass, but the torchbearers of the struggle for human rights and international justice, and therefore a priority on the justice agenda.
Thank you. We next go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 4 minutes, sir.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. General Prosecutor, for being here with us today. I am really happy that with your visit, I've had the opportunity to meet two esteemed colleagues that I'm happy to meet again. If you hadn't come here, Mr. Cutler, I would have underscored the fact that Madame Kara-Murza is present with us today. So the ICC recognized that it doesn't have a police force or a repression force on its own, so it has to So it depends on member states parties to the treaty to enforce arrests, warrants that were decreed by the court. So a representative of the government of Hungary apparently declared that its country cannot arrest President Putin because the Rome Statutes are not part of the legislative framework of Hungary. In your opinion, is this enough justification to avoid respecting these requests by the court?
Every state party, as a matter of international law, signs up to the whole of the treaty. Part 9 of the treaty makes it incumbent upon state parties to cooperate with the court. There are judicial orders that are issued not by me, but by independent judges elected by those very states. One expects all countries around the world that believe in justice, that believe in the consistent application of the law, to be on the side of justice. And states have those decisions, and history judges all of us.
Je vais revenir sur la question.
So I'll come back on the question that Ms. Bendayan asked about the BRICS summit that is planned for June this year. I heard your answer, but some sources claim that South Africa may withdraw from the International Criminal Court. Did you hear this? And are these rumors based in fact?
I tend not to listen to rumours, and I think there's a lot of rumours about my office, about myself, and about everybody probably in this room. So we know it's difficult and dangerous to listen too much to rumours. What I will say, since I've been elected prosecutor, I have tried to re-engage with the continent of Africa. I was the first prosecutor in 17 years last year to be invited to the African Union Heads of State Summit. The invitation was offered again this year. I've been engaging with Chair FAAE in Addis and also with Macky Sall and President Tshisekedi of the DRC when he was the chair. So I think that new rapprochement, that collaboration built upon respect, are based upon complementarity, and that we're not looking at ways of to steal the child of justice from a mother jurisdiction. We are looking at ways of also supporting national authorities to do better, and we are here as a last resort. I think that's also quite important. In terms of the discussion on the BRICS, I just think no country is monolithic. Even Canada, there's a whole spectrum of views. This is the wealth of the well-known mosaic of Canada, and there may well be different views expressed in South Africa or in the United Kingdom or in France or in Canada. In the end of the day, the executive has certain decisions to make. They have to comply with international law, and I think, from what I'm hearing, let's see what happens in relation to BRICS. I think there are those indications that they've said they are well aware of their international obligations. And sometimes further commentary makes it more difficult because every country that's fought for independence, that's fought against apartheid, to have the right to decide its own destiny, sometimes more words complicate rather than help. And that's why I think I will say no more on the topic.
Vous savez que l'Ukraine
Thank you,
et certains de ses
Mr. Bergeron. I'm
partenaires.
afraid you're 30
Okay,
seconds
on
over your
reviendra.
time. So we next go to MP McPherson. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to all three of our guests for being here today. And thank you for the work that you've been doing to hold Vladimir Putin to account for the crimes that he's committed, him and Ms. Lvova-Belova. I also want to express my sympathy and my admiration for Ms. Kara-Murza for the horrific news that we received that her husband has been sentenced to 25 years. I guess what I'll do is I'll start perhaps by asking, in 2021, the ICC ruled that the court's jurisdiction extended to occupied Palestinian territory, and of course we think that this is a positive step in seeking justice and accountability. Canada has refused to acknowledge the ICC's jurisdiction over Palestine, although a majority of Canadians want to see an ICC investigation into the situation in Israel and Palestine. At the Assembly of State Parties last year, you said you were planning a trip to Palestine. Do you have any updates on that trip, and have you received any support from member states like Canada for such a visit? And finally, do you agree that the ICC is one of the only legal forums available for Palestinians to seek justice?
I did say that one of my objectives this year, in addition to all the other missions I'm going on to, included Palestine and also the DRC and also Afghanistan. Afghanistan is proving obviously extremely difficult and ever more so, but I haven't given up. I am in discussions in order to go to Israel and the Palestinian authorities. It's complex, but I'm in those discussions and I don't want to compromise them. But I do think it's important to move forward. Certain decisions have been taken by the predecessor, by also the court. My obligation is to make sure that I discharge my responsibility as effectively as possible, and realizing that complementarity is always an option. When states step up, the court has no role to play, but we are here as a last resort around the world, and we have to work in that manner so that we enhance confidence in the scope and application of international, and we focus on the areas where really there's no justice and no accountability, and we're trying to focus our resources in that manner so that we build confidence in the application of the law. So that's the best answer I can give, I think.
Thank you. And I guess it also comes down to how the ICC is resourced, and there's always concerns that there's not enough resources for you to do the job that you need to do in all the countries in the world that have conflicts and that have require your investigation of the skills of the ICC. States like Canada have made significant voluntary contributions to your office since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. And I'd like to know how much of that funding has gone to the Ukraine situation and how much has been allocated to other investigations, as well as to the court more generally, as opposed to only the prosecutor's office, if I could.
So the presumption of the Rome Statute is the activities of the court are funded through the regular budget. We've tried for a number of years, and I tried and failed last Christmas and the Christmas before. I really failed as an advocate because we didn't get the resources we wanted. In fact, I didn't get €1 of new money at the Assembly of State Parties. I got up to inflation, but no new money. And in fact, the new money being requested was all for field presence in Ukraine. And I was then compelled, even before that, in March, to utilize a provision that had not been used, which is Article 117 that allows the court to receive voluntary contributions. From Canada, Canada has been very generous. We have 1.3 million euros that's been given by the government of Canada, so thank you for that. It's been used at my discretion. It's not earmarked, and particularly more than half of the money is being used to transform the evidence management system that I alluded to earlier. We have 7 secondees that have been provided by all of you, by the Canadian government, that are being on a number of situations in Asia, in Africa, and also in Ukraine, so that we can do better. But the simple truth of the matter is that the court is under-resourced. Yes. I go back to the Ilivisa lecture, and your great Supreme Court judge, Judge Abella, gave the inaugural lecture in 2020, and conjuring up her own losses at the Holocaust, the memory of Raoul Wallenberg's heroism and Elie Wiesel's and the obscenity that has befallen mankind almost every decade since. The budget I inherited was 49.5 million, and we had 16 situations. Now, I put that into context. The budget I had in my last mandate as the special advisor and head of the UN team investigating Daesh, ISIS in Iraq only in Iraq, it was 30 million. And so we're woefully underfunded, and I think there's 2 parts. If all of you, if parliamentary legislators, if budgetary committees, and if treasuries think that the value of international justice is simply in the soundbite, and the principle that there's this lofty principles we aspire to, a distant, rainbow, we're trying to find gold at the end of it, we will never vindicate those people whose emaciated bodies we saw in the gas chambers or we saw in Yugoslavia and elsewhere. We need to be properly resourced. It's an issue of peace and security. It's an issue of moral leadership. And actually, it's something that I think we can do much better on. And I hope Canada will be right at the front this year as well, ensuring that the court is properly budgeted, because certainly it's much cheaper than the 20 or 30 billion, a trillion bill every year to military armaments. I think a very compelling case can be made that it's money well spent, particularly as the leadership of the court is trying to make sure the impact is felt by those that need it the most.
Thank you. We now go to the next member. Mr. Hoback, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Venezuela. I'm just looking at the Venezuela situation and what your results are there, and what can Canada do to assist you in our own hemisphere in countries like Venezuela, and maybe Haiti would be another consideration that have you looked at, and what your ideas in regards to Haiti are too.
Well, if I can back up before Venezuela, there had been a preliminary examination open for 17 years in Colombia. At the end of 2021, within a few months of me becoming prosecutor, I went to Bogota and I signed an agreement with President Duque in which I closed the preliminary examination but didn't abandon Colombia. It was a new arrangement in which the government committed to keep funding the HEP, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. They promised to respect its decision, to give financial support and to protect witnesses. And I committed my office to, in a new posture, outside either an investigation or a preliminary examination, to try to support Colombia under the principle of dynamic complementarity. From Colombia, I went straight to Venezuela. And of course, I'm aware Canada is one of those groups of countries that referred the Venezuela situation to the office. But I commended President Maduro. He was vociferously against, to my face. I had 3 or 4 meetings with him in over 48 hours in the first trip, and said it was unfair and unjust for me to open an investigation in Venezuela when we had given 17 years to Colombia. And I simply told him I think that was wrong to give 17 years to Colombia. But at the same time as opening an investigation, because I said this is what was required, this was my independent judgment, we created a new paradigm in which an MOU was signed by him in the presidential palace, in which we will give every opportunity and try to support Colombia with other Venezuela with other actors, if they are genuine and wish to translate certain legislative changes into practical effect in the courtroom. And that parallel track, I've said, the ideal would be they join, and the state itself can devise something that's work, that's effective, that's independent, like the HEP. But if not, we are here as a last resort, and we are moving forward to independently push forward our mandate. I haven't asked, I mean, Canada is important in all our situations. I think the general support for the finance of the office, the authority of the law, is very important. I think general engagement in Latin America is critical. I'm going on the 12th, so in a few days. It's the first time a prosecutor has been invited to the to the Association of Caribbean States. So I'm trying to engage more with Latin America, because one thing is certain: the physical distance between Europe and The Hague and other parts of the world, whether it's the Pacific Islands or whether it's Latin America, can act as a way of disenfranchising those communities or making them feel it's not their body of law. I think collectively where Canada can help is to show this law is everybody's law. So it's owned by all of us.
Even the threat of an investigation can cause about change in actions within that country. Is that fair to say?
Very briefly, please. Mr. Hoback, you're out of time.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. We now go to MP Oliphant. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Mr. Khan for being here. I hope, I'm glad you are supported by 2 Canadians of great stature. I hope you feel supported, not surrounded, which would be a good thing. As a preacher, I have probably quoted Elie Wiesel more than any other author. And he wrote, "They are committing the greatest indignity human beings can inflict on one another, telling people who have suffered excruciating pain and loss that their pain and loss were illusions." I'm looking at Ukraine. Canada has indeed added additional support to the court, guarding the independence of the court. This is very critical, that when we add funding to the court, you make the decisions about where the money goes. We do not make that. You know, however, Canada has a concern about sexual and gender-based violence in conflict. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the evidence that you are trying to collect, where we have evidence that there are war crimes being committed.
What I can say is there can never be enough Canadians, so I don't feel surrounded, I feel supported. The next point is that I've spent quite some time, and I have some fantastic special advisors. We launched a new policy last Christmas at the Assembly of State Parties on gender persecution. We're rolling out both next month at the Bellagio Centre and also a roundtable for civil society a few weeks later, so in end of May, June, to give life to gender persecution, because we say there's not a conflict in the world in which there's not gender persecution. Just look at Afghanistan and what's happening to women and girls and others there. In terms of sexual or gender-based violence, we are already reviewing the existing policy to make sure it's fit for purpose, and hopefully that will be launched this December at the Assembly of State Parties in New York, and the same applies to the policy for crimes against and affecting children. Children very often are the most invisible parts of the civil population. Far too often they're conflated with the general civilian population, or even worse, sometimes they're collated with crimes of sexual gender-based violence. And until we start seeing clearly how children are affected and disaggregating the types of harm that are inflicted upon them and the generational consequences of that, the aftershocks of those, we're not going to be able to properly investigate or put forward proper cases. In terms of Ukraine, I think what is known from a number of public sources are the types of allegations regarding crimes against children. But in terms of the detail of those, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to say more at this time.
If I have any time, I'll give it to Mr. Zuberi.
Can I just add one thing, if you don't mind, Honourable Oliphant, is that partnerships is key. In addition to many other new initiatives, for example, first time in the history of the court, we've joined a joint investigative team with 7 countries under the auspices of Eurojust. We also produced with the Genocide Network. Canada plays an important role there, and also a civil society guidebook for civil society organizations about how to document sexual gender-based crimes, crimes against children, to make sure we don't revisit the horrors of the past, namely the over-documentation we've seen in Myanmar regarding the Rohingya, or the need, what we've seen in Iraq and Syria that gave rise to the Murad Code. So really we're trying to deal with many partners, universities, civil society, national authorities as well, collectively build this common ground where everybody feels they have a stake, because they do. And hopefully if we have that inclusive approach, we can do better than we have in the past.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We next go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 1.5 minutes.
Merci,
Thank you, Chair. Ukraine and some of its partners requested the creation of a special tribunal to prosecute against the crime of aggression that Russia committed against this country. So parties to the ICC last December, during a speech, you said that there was some shortcomings in the institutional architecture relating to crimes of aggression, but you said that these shortcomings can be reduced through the Rome Statutes. So what did you have in mind when you made that declaration?
Well, I think everybody from Nuremberg onwards, we realized the crime of aggression is a serious crime. It has within it it subsumes within it the parts of many other conflicts. Not always. Rwanda was an internal armed conflict. In 100 days, there was no crime of aggression. It was Rwandese against Rwandese, and after the Holocaust, maybe it hasn't been such an intense period of killing, since that period than that example, and that wasn't a crime of aggression. That wouldn't have cured anything. In relation to that, it was the failure of early warning signals. I start with a general proposition as a lawyer. It's a matter of equity. The law we apply against others is the law we should hold ourselves to. It brings the law into disrepute. It increases marginalization. It leads to a gap, a distance, and a dissonance between parts of the world if they see unabated selectivity in which law is being applied as a stick and is not being applied to oneself. Now, the Rome Statute has the crime of aggression. It was drafted in Kampala. It is active. We have an active jurisdiction, but there were jurisdictional requirements for it to apply. Now, if we have matured as an international community, and if we realize that there is a missing piece, the law can be better than it is, for me, the obvious, logical, and equitable way would be to amend it through the Rome Statute. But what I'm focused on is the law we've got. And what I think is a little bit unfortunate is the law we have is not impotent. The law we have was sufficient for Milosevic, Karadzic, Mladic, Jean Kabanda, Hissène Habré in Senegal, individual after individual, to come before courts and bow their heads towards justice. And I think we're, as you can see in terms of the Ukraine situation, the new warrants in Libya and elsewhere, we're trying to be less pedestrian, to accelerate into action and be relevant and be on the front lines. And I think focusing too much about the law we don't have can overshadow the law we do. And the challenge should be making the law we do have as effective and meaningful as possible. And that should be something that binds us together.
We now go to Madam McPherson. You have 1.5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, this has been very interesting. Thank you very much for all this information. I know many of us are very seized with the violence that is happening in Sudan. We're worried about a proxy war. We're worried about it spilling out of the borders. In recent years, with key actors responsible for the violence now being waged against civilians, we've seen the increase in violence result, and yet so far, sir, you haven't released any statement condemning the violence or reminding relevant parties that your office has an open investigation, pledging your solidarity with victims. Why is that? And perhaps you'd like to do that now.
Yeah. I don't think the police in Canada keep talking about, what the law is. Their job is to investigate and to arrest people and bring them before courts who decide. And generally, my approach is different to my predecessor. There are many other parts of necessary humility, but also pragmatism. I'm not the High Commissioner of Human Rights. I'm not a special rapporteur in Geneva. What preventative statements can do is show the impotence of international law, because if people don't listen to it, every day of the week I'll be spending time giving statements in different situations that nobody heeds. I think this is the moment where we have to show the law in action. We do it by trying to do our job, take the criticism, take the slaps of criticism, it goes with the job. But in the end, as long as we act with fidelity to the law, over a period of time we'll show that the office has changed, it's building stronger cases, it's moving as quickly as the resources allow, and move forward. So that's my approach in terms of preventative statements. There's nothing against Sudan. I report twice a year to the Security Council. In my last report, and then I say things quite openly, in my last report to the Security Council, I made it very clear that the cooperation had deteriorated, that the next period was going to be a litmus test to whether or not Sudan was cooperating with the Security Council, and whether or not the Security Council itself was willing for its own decision to be so flagrantly ignored, and the consequence of that, because if Sudan could ignore it, why can't every other country? But we will keep trying to work as well as we can.
Thank you very much.
We next go to MP Epp. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all three of you gentlemen for being here today. Mr. Khan, in your opening statement, you referred to the role of the law as a shelter for victims. In earlier questioning, it became apparent some of the effects of the lack of universalism, particularly in questions on Iran from my colleagues. I am not burdened, as a colleague of mine says in the House, often burdened with a legal education. So my questions might be a little naive. I have a daughter who has one, so don't confuse that for lack of respect. The 123 state parties have signed on. The lack of universalism, does that affect any of your work in state countries, given their potential or relationships with non-state countries? Or is your work impeded at all?
I think it's not helped. I mean, the reality is Richard Goldstone, the first chief prosecutor of the Yugoslav and Rwandan tribunal, was very fond of saying that politics lies at the center and the margins of international law. And if one doesn't understand the politics, one will not be able to understand and grasp the law. So international relations are multi-layered. Every state will have its strategic partners, it will have its most favored nations, it will have bilateral relations and multilateral relations, and of course that will inform other areas of the international firmament, positive and negatively. So, at the same time, states have certain responsibilities, and what we've seen, and what gives me hope, when the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, the International Bill of Rights, the children of the Universal Declaration, was signed in 1966, the United States, China, large rafts of the world didn't sign up, but they did eventually. Then it may be an issue of signing but not implementing. So the point is, one just has to realize, the small step for, mankind, the giant leap for humanity or whatever, from going on to the moon. The reality, we have to make humble steps to get to the destination we want. And I think the fact we have 123 states, so the majority of the world, is something to applaud. But of course, powerful states, popular states, whether it's United States of America or Russia or China or Pakistan or India, one has to work. And this may be a generational project, but it's a project worth putting the effort into and aspiring to deliver on.
I'm going to extend that question to the present question of Ukraine, the investigation of the Ukraine, with only 45 countries of the 123 having signed on. I perhaps didn't understand. You say when countries sign on to the whole, they must sign on to the whole treaty. So is there any impact that you're anticipating with your work in Ukraine now, because only 45 countries have signed on?
Well, I wasn't clear on that. So
Okay.
all of the 123 states are obligated as a matter of treaty law to cooperate with the court. What happened is, when I was in Cox's Bazar on the 24th, and the minute I came back to The Hague, I invited states to accelerate the opening of an investigation by them referring the matter to me. That was an accelerant. Instead of doing the normal process, it would give me quicker jurisdiction. And within 48 hours, unheard of in the ICC, 39 countries referred the matter to us. Now it's 43. So that actually is a sign of positivity. It doesn't mean the rest don't have to comply. It means a third of the states felt sufficiently galvanized that they decided to refer the matter to make sure we could look into what was unfolding on the territory of Ukraine.
Thank you. And now we go to our final question to MP Sorbera.
Thank you.
minutes,
And
MP
good morning, gentlemen, and welcome, Mr. Cohen. Last week, I led the delegation to the Council of Europe meetings in Strasbourg. Mr. Browder was there, and Karamuza's wife was also in attendance and gave a speech to one of the European political parties, which we attended, so I listened to the remarks quite intently. The Council of Europe is working on and proceeding on the establishment of a registry of record to document evidence and claims of damage, of loss, of injury as a result of Russian aggression against Ukraine. It's something that the Secretary General spoke about, and the 46-state nation is moving forward. Would this registry of record be independent of anything the ICCC is currently proceeding, or is there any sort of overlap? Because the end goal is obviously holding Russia to account and the Russian perpetrators to account.
As I understand it, it's completely separate. The ICC as an institution can award reparations in relation to people that are convicted. The registry of record, I think, is in relation to war damages, and that normally we've seen in other historical scenarios comes at the end of conflicts as part of peace agreements. But that would be a different piece of architecture that will deal with, the rights of Ukraine or responsibility of others.
I'd like to follow. I believe we have 3 minutes, which gives me a minute. I'd like to put 2 questions to you. One is around picking up on what my colleague Ms. McPherson mentioned around your intent to go to the Middle East region in order to promote peace and justice. By having justice, then that leads to peace. If you'd like to comment slightly on that. And also, secondly, on Tajikistan, there is a case, I believe, that was put forth to your court around Tajikistan and the Uyghur. If you'd like to comment on that. And we know about the UN report saying crimes against humanity might be occurring towards Uyghur. If you'd like to comment on those 2 briefly.
Yes, in relation to the second, it's the same answer, I'm afraid, that I don't comment on communications in real time. There's a process in terms of communication, and I have to cut my suit according to the cloth we've got based upon, a number of different situations, but also jurisdiction and evidence, of course, is not a small thing. It's the single biggest thing to look at the quality of evidence. In relation to peace and justice, I think it's a very broad question. Absolutely, there's a nexus between the 2. They're both, different sides of the same coin. And we have seen in so many scenarios that if one thinks there can be a sustainable peace without justice, it tends to be a cessation of hostilities as opposed to a peace. And so, what we need to do is to make sure there's more justice. It can be done in a way that doesn't compromise peace, but certainly it can't be airbrushed away because it's inconvenient. We need to realize as a species that what we're talking about is not politics. It's genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. And for goodness sake, we need to speak with one voice. That as we are sending telescopes to see distant galaxies, different universes, in fact, we need to do better here on planet Earth and make these types of crimes extinct. And we fail to do that, and that's why I feel we should feel ashamed We should really feel ashamed when you look at Holocaust survivors and you look at survivors of Cambodia or of, and I've represented those victims as well, and the Balkans. Nadia Murad, last book was called The Last Girl, and she's not the last girl. And we talk as if it's light. We talk as if it's some kind of show we're watching. And that, okay, next time we'll do better. We didn't win this game. Let's try and win the next game. I think we need to feel offended and ashamed and decide what do we need to do collectively as every state, as every individual, and as international institutions, that we can actually make these type of obscenities finally extinct. Because if we do not do it now, we shouldn't have this illusion or this assumption that there will be generations in the future that can cure our own mistakes of today. Because we have the means of destruction that we've never had in human history. And that's why I think it's another reason, yet another reason why you have great responsibilities as members of parliament to make sure that we don't just pass the buck because maybe there'll be nobody to pass it to.
Thank you very much. That concludes this session. Allow me to say on behalf of all of the members that Prosecutor Khan, we're very, very grateful that you made the time to be here with us, and we are obviously very impressed by your commitment, your energy, and thank you for pointing out the challenges and reminding us of what we're supposed to do as well. I should say we're also grateful that you were supported by two eminent Canadian jurists, and we're very, very grateful that you made time for us. Appreciate it. So, members, before we adjourn, is it the will of the committee to submit witness lists for the study of Canada's sanction regime by 5 p.m. on Friday, May 12th, 2023? Yep. Excellent. Meeting adjourned.